So, folks, I'm here with Daniel. How do you say your last name?
Gruesso.
Just like it looks.
Just like it looks.
Good deal. And what do you do at GitLab?
I am a product manager, and I focused mostly on the infrastructure and operations features of GitLab. So everything that has to do with our Kubernetes integration, serverless, all of those things, and everything that supports operators in their day-to-day jobs.
Good deal. Now, typically our podcast episodes are like an hour long, but we only have the room for a half hour. So we'll see how long we go. And then maybe we'll get you on Adventures in DevOps or something for a longer discussion.
Okay, sounds good.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
In fact, we had, I think Priyanka Sharma was our first guest on that show. So,
nice.
So lots of good stuff from GitLab. What we're talking about here, there were a couple of things. One was, at least what your PR folks reached out to me about was developing in the open. And then there was a developer report that was released.
That's right.
And so let's just start with developing in the open for a minute. So GitLab, is it all 100% open source or just parts of it, or how does that work?
So we work on an open core model. So we have two distributions. We have a community edition.
Which I have set up on a server.
That's right. So that's open source, 100% free. Right. And then we have an enterprise edition, which is our second distribution, and that's an open core model. So the source is available, but you need a license to operate.
Okay, gotcha.
And so that's kind of on a custom license. And so that's kind of the software part of it. But we also work entirely in the open. So most open source projects have their code available. And a lot of the work that they do may not be available, like the features that they're working on, the roadmap, the vision that they have for a certain feature. So all of that at GitLab is 100% open. So you could go today and see what my team has on the roadmap. You could drill down into an issue and you can chat with the developers, the product people that are working on building a certain thing. All right.
So that's really interesting because a lot of companies don't do that. I'm curious what you see as the trade-offs between the different models.
So it's definitely it definitely comes with some challenges. I think that one aspect of having everything out in the open is that you will get opinions from everywhere, and the easier that you make it to contribute, the more feedback that you get. So basically, navigating through that noise kind of becomes a skill, and you have to learn where to look and where not to look. Also, I think that
you're on the internet though, so I'm sure some of it's interesting.
Yeah, sure, exactly. So we spend some time on Hacker News, kind of giving feedback to the community or answering questions, or maybe clarifying certain things that may not be 100% right.
Gotcha.
And things like that. So when you make it easy to contribute, that's one part of it. And the second part of it is that you have to be a lot more diligent in keeping everything up to date.
Right.
So because kind of if you have a problem statement out there that is old and is not updated, and you have a community member that says, hey, I want to solve this problem. I see that they have this laid out. And then they are kind of contributing something that will not work. The responsibility falls on you to make sure everything's up to date. All the communication devices that you use are updated. And basically that the information is on the hands of everyone.
Right.
That's what we call that a low bus factor. And that is if you get hit by a bus today, would the team have correct information and could they continue to work? Right. So we try to keep that bus factor low.
Yeah, we discussed bus factors at several of the jobs that I had in the past. And that's definitely something that's important.
Yeah.
So are there things that you I guess, miss from having a closed model or not having such a public conversation?
Well, I think that like on my prior companies, most of the work was private. And I think that, I don't want to say that that makes you more lazy, but you are definitely have a stronger sense of urgency when you work in the open. So when you work in private and you work, let's say, with a co-located team, it's easier to provide that information in a verbal way. And if you don't have a lot of written down information or, a common source of information for the whole team, it's kind of less work.
Right.
But I think that still the benefits outweigh the fact that when you communicate with a smaller group, it's easier.
That makes sense. So if another company wanted to try this model, let's say that they're an established company, they've been doing it, in kind of a closed loop for a while. What recommendations do you have for them? Where's the pain going to be? Where are the payoffs going to be?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How do you get started?
I think that when you have an open source project, you kind of have a leg up because you're probably distributed, right?
Right.
That probably means that you have a higher standard for how you communicate. You probably write everything down. You probably have like processes that are very established and you've given a lot of thought to them. So I think that if you have an open source project, it's especially beneficial. I think that 3 things that we found that work very well for us is one is keeping a single source of truth. So a lot of teams disseminate information amongst various systems, so you don't know which one holds the truth.
Right.
So I think that one thing that we do is keeping everything update on the issue that we're going to work on, or the epic, or whatever that vehicle may be.
Right. So then if there's conflicting information, that one is the one that you...
Exactly. You should always know where to look if you see a conflict of information. Well, I look in here and I know that this is always kind of up to date. Because we work asynchronously, so GitLab has around 800 people across 6 continents, about 50 countries. So not all of our communication is in real time. So we make sure to write everything down. For example, if we do have a synchronous meeting where we meet over Zoom, we have Zoom set up to automatically record them.
Right.
And we have a script that automatically uploads them to Google Drive. So we'll drop a link.
Can I get a copy of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we drop a link of the meeting in the issue and saying, so we came to this conclusion based on this conversation, and that'll be a link to the Google Drive meeting. So that's one thing that we do. Another thing that we do is that we paste Slack conversations that led us to a decision in the issues as well. So chat, it's kind of very low friction. So if you have a question, you kind of gravitate towards chat. And sometimes on a channel, you will ask one person a question and you'll end up with 10 people participating and like a very cool solution to a problem.
Right.
So instead of, putting all of, we put a summary, but we also copy and paste that into the issue to make sure that you have context. So those are some of the things that we do. So I think that communicating is very important, and providing that context is very important.
One of the biggest pain points that I find as I talk to people about software is deployment. It's really interesting to have the conversations with people where it's, I don't want to deal with Docker. I don't want to deal with Kubernetes. I don't want to deal with setting up servers. I don't, all of these different things. And in a lot of ways, DevOps has gotten a lot easier. And in a lot of ways, DevOps has also kind of embraced a certain amount of culture around applications, the way we build them, the way we deploy them. And I've really felt for a long time that developers need to have the conversations with DevOps or adopt some form of DevOps so that they can take control of what they're doing and really understand when things go to production, what's going on, so that they can help debug the issues and fix the issues and find the issues when they go wrong and help streamline things and make things better and slicker and easier so that they'll more generally go right. So we started a podcast called Adventures in DevOps. And I pulled in one of the hosts from one of my favorite DevOps shows, Nell Shamrell Harrington from the Food Fight Show, and we got things rolling there. And so this is more or less a continuation of the Food Fight Show, where we're talking about the things that go into DevOps. So if you're struggling with any of these operational type things, then definitely check out Adventures in DevOps. And you can find it at adventuresindevopspodcast.com.
So I would say that giving others context is very important, and that's something that I think we do well. And I think that lastly, it's having a low barrier for others to be able to contribute. Mm-hmm. So if you want to chime in, I shouldn't have to put you through like hoops and signing documents and stuff like that. It should be easy for you to do that.
Right.
So we've kind of tried to do that as much as possible so everybody can chime in.
That's awesome. Man, now I want to start a remote Teams podcast.
Yeah. So actually our former VP of product, his name is Job, he has a remote work podcast, and he interviews people from different companies and stuff like that, and best practices and things like that. So that's a very good resource. We have a bunch of pages in our handbook about working remotely and things like that. So that's kind of one aspect of it. But I think that working on it in the open, if you're a remote team, you have a leg up over everyone else. Basically.
Right, because you're already communicating over the internet.
That's right.
That makes sense. It's just a fascinating concept. Well, let's talk about this developer report that you put out.
Yes. So we are in our third year of doing this developer survey. Uh-huh. And I brought some of my notes here just to...
Where do people find it first?
So if you simply Google GitLab 2019 developer survey, it'll come right up.
Right.
And you can download it. It's about 20-something pages. And basically, it's about 4,000 respondents, and they all share their experiences, and they help us uncover about things that are working, things that need work, areas of improvement, and things like that. So the big takeaway this year was that teams that adopt kind of mature and strong DevOps practices earlier are experiencing greater benefits like security, and basically being able to innovate at a faster rate.
Right.
So a lot of teams that are getting started, things like security and things like basically having easy environments to test with and things like that, it comes after they have kind of built and shipped their projects. So having all those things built in from an early stage has really benefited.
Right.
So that is one aspect of it. Another aspect is that continuous delivery is on the rise. So here we see 43% of people said that they continuously deploy.
I'm working on that.
Okay. And 41% said that it happens between once a day and once a month. So, that used to be a lot different if you just go 5 years back. Having once a month or once a quarter deployments was a lot more common. So I was really surprised to see how that has risen so fast.
Yeah, I remember staying up all night for the once a quarter deployment, right?
Absolutely. And like that broken build on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're going to deploy. We're going to wait till after work on Friday. We'll buy everybody pizza. And it's funny, too, because it's like, it should only take an hour because we know it'll work.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, right.
That hour for a lot of people turned into the weekend, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And trying to fix things that they didn't account for and things like that. So doing it more continuously, I think that has shown people that you find problems faster, is low risk, and things like that. So that was really great to see. So just on the topic we were chatting about prior, we saw that remote teams outperform on-site teams.
Really?
So, yes. So basically with the respondents, we see that developers in a mostly remote environment are 23% more likely to have good insight into what their colleagues are working on. Basically, here we see that on a rate, their organization practices tend to be 29% higher than those that work in a traditional office setting. So security, I think, is more at the left. So basically baked in with your development process when you're all remote and when you're in an office.
Right.
Basically. So that was a big one as well. I think that security for us, we have seen this become a very hot subject, especially with buyers of our licensed product. Like most of the security features are licensed, and that a lot of times is the number one topic that they bring into a conversation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I mean, you mentioned that they're more productive. There's kind of a hot Twitter thread right now going on where people are talking about 10x engineers.
Yes,
I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah,
I have. Yeah.
And it's funny because I was thinking about it and I was like, well, some people are just more productive than others. I don't know if it's 10x. And then I realized, a lot of it has to do with environment.
Absolutely.
And the way that their team is organized and things like that. I mean, you might have a 10x engineer, so to speak, in your company, and it's just because everything aligns nicely with the way that they think and work. And then, you have somebody else there that you're comparing them to, and they're 10 times less effective, and you go put them in this other company and they're going to thrive there. And so I think it's interesting, talking about this, remote teams are more productive. It's like, okay, what are the reasons for that? Why does that work that way? And, the same thing with the security. It's like, what is it about having a remote team that makes them more mindful of that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things there. I think that one thing that we do is that people choose their own hours. So even if we both live in the same part of the country or, in the same state, it doesn't mean
we should
that
move in next door to each other.
Right. It doesn't mean that we're both expected to work like a set of hours. Right. So that's number one. I think that I've seen a lot here at GitLab that developers are more productive when they work. Let's say I see a lot of people work a part in the morning and a part in the evening. And then throughout the day, they sprinkle like family things, personal things, and things like that. So number one, that prevents them from having to attend meetings that at other companies they would deem as mandatory.
Right.
Here, we don't really have set meetings. So I think that that's a huge plus. So we try to make all of those decisions asynchronously, even on an issue or Slack. And when we see that something is going too long, we may set up like a Zoom meeting and things like that. But I think that lack of meetings for sure makes people more productive. So that's number one. And number two is that, they don't have all the distractions that you have in an office. So in an office, when you came to work, maybe you came to work at 9, then, you go get coffee and you chat with your peers and you get interruptions and all of these things. So I think that of a given day, people might have like 50% of time where they can actually dedicate to work. And in product, that's even worse because a product manager just has meetings pretty much 60% of the day.
Right.
So making time to do work is it's tough. So at an all remote company, that it's kind of a great benefit that you get to choose the time that you work in, and we don't measure the hours that you put in, but rather the output of your work.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. In fact, when you were talking about how they were more productive, I almost tried to interrupt you and say, hey, I have a quick question. Because that was the bane of my existence working in an office.
It's that tap on the shoulder that makes you context switch multiple times throughout the day and just takes longer to solve problems that way.
Yep. And my hack for that was I'd put my headphones on when I was trying to get dedicated work done. And people would come up and they'd get my attention and I'd just be like, and this is audio, right? So I wag my finger at them and then I'd point to my headphones and basically be like, not now, come back, 30 minutes or something, right?
Yeah. So just like that headphone hack, a lot of people in my prior workplace would have, like, I don't know if you've been to this restaurant called Bubba Gump Shrimp. It's in Florida and it's all Forrest Gump themed. And when you want the waiter to come, you switch your card to Run Forrest Run. And if you don't need them, you swap them to Stop Forrest Stop. And it was kind of the same deal here. They would have some card on their desk to the effect of do not disturb me. I'm in the middle of something deep.
Right.
So working remotely kind of eliminates all of those things.
Yeah, it does. You should set yourself to away on Slack.
Yeah.
And then they know that if they send you a message, you're probably not going to reply.
That's right. Yeah. So that's one thing that we stress here is that the only immediate response that you should expect is if you call someone on the phone.
Right.
If you Slack me, don't expect an immediate response. Same if you mention me in an issue or even send me an email. All of those things should be asynchronous modes of communication.
Yeah. And see, I have a remote team that helps me with the podcasts and we use Discord. And it's the same kind of thing, right? It's like they know I'm here. They, even when I'm at home, they know that I may not always respond right away. And that's just kind of the way that we work. And it's really convenient. I am curious though, how does the remote setup correlate then to the security thing?
Well, so I think that in a lot of co-located teams, if there's no there's kind of an agreement on the work. And then as we evolve the work that we do, then we think about security.
Right.
So here, when you work remotely, what I've seen more is that if you're given a problem to solve, you're not going to think as a group about security later. You're going to think about the problem that you're solving now and all the aspects around it. And
interesting.
Security being one of those. So from the get-go, you have to start thinking about those things instead of later, convening with the other work that your team is doing and then having a chat about security.
Right. That makes sense.
One of the things that I have as a goal for devchat.tv is to cover technologies that are up and coming, things that we're probably going to have to deal with on a more regular basis in the future. Some of these include AI, VR, and one of them is blockchain. So I reached out to one of the experts that I knew, Gregory McCubbin, and we pulled together a few other people, and we've started a podcast called Adventures in Blockchain. So if you're looking at blockchain as something that you may want to work in, something that you're curious about learning more about, or something that you just want to keep current on until you have the opportunity to make a career jump and go over and work in blockchain and crypto, then definitely check out Adventures in Blockchain. You can find it at adventuresinblockchain.io.
So was there anything else interesting that you wanted to highlight in the report?
So here we see that around security, again, we see that roadblocks are still abundant in the development practice. Meaning that software professionals recognize the need for security to be baked in, but security teams feel that developers are not doing enough to focus on security.
Oh, interesting.
And we see here that 69% of respondents agree that developers are expected to write secure code, but 68% of security professionals feel that less than half of developers are able to spot vulnerabilities in their code compared to security teams that look at that same code at a later phase of development. Right. Security is just such a huge topic right now. And having that as early as possible in the development process, I think, has really helped us.
That makes sense. I'm a little bit curious on that one too. I think the expectation's there that you're going to write secure code, but then I don't really see people getting trained on how to write secure code.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, I think that it also depends very much on the kind of project that you're working on. That's also another common concern with working out in the open is security. If I have my code base out there, it's more vulnerable for people to try to crack it. There's kind of a couple of different ways that we solve for that. And one is that we have this value at GitLab of boring solutions. Mm-hmm. So like choosing established technologies to solve the problems that we want to solve instead of like the newest and shiniest technology and things like that. So that's number one. And number two, we have a bounty program that we started not too long ago that has already paid over $200,000 in bounties.
Oh, wow.
And so that's kind of leveraging the community to help you get in front of all the security problems. Yeah. So that has been huge as well.
That makes sense. I like the boring solutions idea. Just that, people have been beating on this for 10 years or 15 years, 20 years, right?
Yeah, so and if it has a huge community behind it, and like a lot of companies that work at scale use it, there's probably something there.
Right. The hot new framework, they're still adding features. They haven't even addressed some of these things.
That's right. Yeah. So I think Dan McKinley talks about innovation tokens and how you have a limited set of tokens and you should use them sparingly, right? Mm-hmm. And so we see that as well. There are other frameworks like for front end. We used to use one and now we switched to Vue.js.
Yep.
So those things that they have steam and you see them kind of lift off. So there's something, behind that too, and you should discount it, but it should be sparingly. Yeah.
Yeah. We've had GitLab people on our Vue.js podcast as well. So yeah,
we have some really talented.
You do. You definitely do. I've also seen a few of them stolen away to like Netlify and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, it's a common thing when you work in the open and people see the quality of your work.
Oh yeah.
And so it's I think that it should be where you're the happiest, but that's definitely a thing.
Yeah. But I love that idea of just going with something that's bulletproof. And that's not to say that you can't innovate, or use innovative technologies, but there's a certain level of risk or unknown that is there that is not there with the proven stuff.
Yeah. So another example that I can think of that is Kubernetes. When we started making bets on Kubernetes, it was still early, and it was still like not the winner
right.
Of the container wars. And So those kind of bets, you should still make them. You should not put all of your eggs in one basket. You should still make them, but as I said, kind of sparingly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one thing to go out and understand the technologies as they're coming up. It's another thing to go, build your whole infrastructure and move it all over to Kubernetes before it's ready.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, one thing common with Kubernetes is that people think that it will solve all of their problems and we should move to it immediately. So,
I'm still waiting.
And a lot of people are, and you're right. It's not right for everyone to do something just because kind of there's a trend and the market is moving towards one place.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, it is, especially in the position that GitLab's in, I mean, I think it'd be almost irresponsible for you to ignore it, right? Sure. You need to understand it, but that doesn't mean that you're going to go and build, like I said, build your whole infrastructure on.
Yeah. Yet. So that's exactly how we felt with serverless. It's like we've had enough appetite from users saying, "Hey, you would be in a great position to do this. When will we see kind of a serverless feature and things like that?" So that makes us kind of explore a certain feature, and then from that, we'll build an MVC, start getting feedback, and just build on top of that. Yeah.
Right.
So another thing that came out of the survey is that the maturity of DevOps models is improving. And so overall, we see that DevOps has been kind of this very hot word for a long time, but adoption of more mature practices is on the rise. And those are things like thinking about security earlier, having more ephemeral environments where people can test things and try to break them and things like that. So those that use mature models are 1.5 times more likely to innovate and 3 times more likely to discover security vulnerabilities earlier on their pipeline.
Oh, nice.
So there are still developers who report poor DevOps implementations, which the report shows leaves organizations 2.6 times more likely to encounter red tape that slows down all the effort for quick fixing of those security problems.
Interesting. So how was the survey conducted?
So we surveyed over 4,000 software professionals from January 23rd to February 27th. And this is, basically all asking you about what practices do you currently follow, what areas do you feel you can improve, what areas do you feel you're doing well at, and things like that. So that was basically it.
Interesting. So you just send this out to your email list or to your users, or?
So there's a sign up for it. Yeah. So I think that we publish a website and then we communicate about the survey on social media and through events and things like that. And people are invited to sign up and take the survey. And year over year, we've seen that there's a kind of higher number of people take the survey. And I think that has to do also with kind of people now knowing more what GitLab is. So, no longer do we get a lot of, GitHub, you're GitHub, right? So we're now more of an established name and people recognize us a bit more. So I think that has helped for sure kind of increase that number.
That makes sense. How does this inform what you're doing at GitLab?
Well, so I think that a lot of the features and roadmap that we worked on is informed by user feedback. Perhaps not specifically by the developer report, but that's certainly part of it. So we see that a very common theme was security. So, we'll probably invest more in strengthening some of those features. But because we work out in the open, one of the benefits is that we get feedback from real world use cases about how people are experiencing certain problem, how they're working around it. And that informs a lot of the things that we do. So that's another huge benefit of working out in the open. So I would say that it's a combination of things. So there are categories that we know that we want to work on, and we want to bring all these new things, like chaos engineering, for example, is one that my team is set to work on this year. That one may be one where we don't have a lot of community feedback on saying, hey, I would love to see this in GitLab, but it's something that we know that we want to innovate on, and we are in a good position to do that. So that's part of it as well, kind of innovation and moving forward with market.
Right. That makes sense. Very cool. So what are you hoping to get out of OSCON this year?
Well, so far, great keynotes. I really want to kind of see how all things cloud native are evolving from a community standpoint, what projects are interesting that we may be able to leverage at GitLab, and what kind of practices as well. And I'm just hoping to learn more about uses of like new serverless technologies like Knative.
Right.
So that is something that we support at GitLab. I would love to learn more about real world use cases of those newer things.
Right.
That we kind of have a hard time with people adopting something that may not be V1 or GA yet. But yet there are people out there in the real world that have some very cool use cases. So I want to learn more about those as well. And I also want to see more and more how people are deploying their cloud native apps. So common things that I look for are, how do you structure your security implementation when you use Kubernetes? How do you deploy? And that is, the model where you may use one namespace for pre-prod environments,
right? But
then in the same cluster, do you feel that it's secure enough to have a production environment on it and things like that? So things like that I find very interesting. And I find that that informs a lot of the things that we want to build for our user base.
Cool. We're just about out of time. One thing that I'm curious about too is just, if people want to follow this kind of progress from GitLab or from you online, where do they find it?
Well, so you can find me at Daniel Gruesso. That's Gruesso. That's both on GitLab and Twitter and pretty much everywhere. But if you want to find out more about the developer report, the easiest way is to go to our homepage, and that's about.gitlab.com. And right there on the homepage, you'll find the link to the developer report towards the bottom of the page.
Right.
So you can access it there.
Cool. Well, I can kind of give a short testimonial for GitLab because I use it for a lot of my stuff, and I really, really like it.
Oh, that's great.
And I love the DevOps tools that are built into it. Just, it's like, it just ran my CI for me. And I really didn't have to do very much at all to set it up. So, it makes a lot of things really, really easy. And it's a cool project. The UI is pretty intuitive. It has a lot of the features that you would expect from something like GitLab or GitHub. It has feature parity in a lot of ways with, not everything, but a lot of things. And so it's a cool project.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, so we try to make those workflows easy, and we try to provide best practices out of the box. So I'm glad to hear that it kind of has worked out well for you.
Yep. Very cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. And we'll see if we can get you on Adventures in DevOps.
All right. Thank you, Charles.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACH